The Murder at 1161. Welcome to today's audiobook reading of The Murder at 1161, a gripping novel by Adrian Blackwell. 25 years ago, three men stood inside a 14th-floor conference room, staring at numbers that should not have existed. $7 million had vanished. Two powerful families blamed each other, and the third man in the room quietly disappeared from the story. For a generation, the Kingstons and the Bennetts inherited a feud built on suspicion, pride, and a crime neither side fully understood. But the past left behind one impossible clue. A timestamp, 11:61 p.m. There is no such time. Now, when Meridian Consolidated launches a hostile takeover against both family companies, Adrian Kingston and Sophie Bennett are forced into an alliance neither of them wants. Then a board member is found dead at the bottom of a stairwell. Archive files vanish, threats arrive, and a mystery buried for 25 years begins to breathe again. As Adrian and Sophie follow the trail through old ledgers, erased records, hidden witnesses, and dangerous betrayals, they discover that their families may never have been true enemies. Someone built the lie, someone protected it, and someone is still willing to kill to keep the truth buried. This is a story of murder, corporate power, family rivalry, hidden evidence, and the courage to question an inherited grudge. Settle in, listen closely, and enter the world of The Murder at 1161. Chapter 1: The Vote. Present-day Adrian Kingston had learned, over 11 years as CEO of Kingston Global, that the worst news always arrived wearing a good suit. Today, it arrived in the form of a slide deck, projected against the glass wall of the 40th-floor boardroom, spelling out in clean corporate sans serif exactly how badly his company was about to be devoured. Meridian Consolidated Holdings, proposal for strategic acquisition. Beneath the header, a tender offer that was, technically, generous. Practically, it was a noose with a bow tied on it. They've accumulated 14% of our float through proxies, said Marguerite Oyelaran, Kingston Global's general counsel, without looking up from her tablet. Legally, above board. Morally, it's a raid. They can't be doing this alone, Adrian said. He kept his voice level, the way he kept everything level. The tie, the schedule, the 6 years since his father's stroke had put the company in his hands, ready or not. Meridian doesn't have the balance sheet for a hostile play this size. Someone's financing them. We don't know who yet. Find out. Across town, in a glass tower with Bennett Holdings etched over the entrance in brushed steel, Sophie Bennett was having, essentially, the same conversation, 40 minutes ahead of schedule, and with considerably less patience. They're not just coming for us, she told her board. They've made an identical offer to Kingston Global. Same week, same percentage premium, structured almost line for line. She turned the laptop around so the room could see the two term sheets side by side, the language nearly a mirror image of itself. Whoever wrote this wanted both companies destabilized at the same time. That's not opportunism. That's a plan. Her brother Marcus, 2 years out of business school and still young enough to say the quiet part out loud, leaned forward. You think Meridian's working with Kingston Global? I think, Sophie said, that somebody wants us to think that. She did not enjoy admitting that the two companies' fates had been braided together since before she was born. Bennett Holdings and Kingston Global had once been one company. Ashcroft Kingston Bennett, dissolved before Sophie could walk. Its wreckage still legally entangling the two firms through Crown Ridge Trust, a jointly held patent and licensing vehicle neither side had managed to fully unwind in 25 years. It was Crown Ridge that Meridian's twin offers actually targeted. It was Crown Ridge that made the Bennetts and the Kingstons, whether they liked it or not, still tied at the wrist. She liked it about as much as she imagined Adrian Kingston did. They met, as they always did, in the one room in the city that belonged to neither family, the mediation suite on the 61st floor of the Ashford Tower, named for the man who had underwritten half the building's original construction, a philanthropist so old and so retiring that most young executives assumed he'd died years ago. Adrian arrived first, which annoyed him because it meant he had to watch Sophie Bennett walk in exactly on time, unhurried, as though she'd known precisely how long it would take him to grow impatient. Mr. Kingston, Miss Bennett, he didn't stand. She didn't seem to expect him to. I assume you've seen Meridian's paperwork. I assume you've seen that it's identical to mine. I have. Then you already know why I'm here, and it isn't because I enjoy your company. Adrian almost smiled. Almost. Crownridge Trust holds joint IP that both our companies depend on. If Meridian forces a vote and wins either company, they gain leverage over the trust regardless of what happens to the other. Which means we're both exposed no matter which of us they take first. Sophie sat, finally, across from him, closing the distance to something almost like an alliance. I don't like this arrangement any more than you do, Mr. Kingston, but I don't intend to lose my grandfather's company to a shell corporation because our families were too busy hating each other to notice the wolf already inside the house. Your grandfather's company, Adrian said quietly, is exactly the reason we're in this position. Sophie's eyes hardened. That's an interesting thing to say to the woman about to save your board $30 million in legal fees. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time in rapid succession, never a good sign. He read the message, and something in his face changed in a way Sophie would later think back on as the actual beginning of everything. What is it? She said. Not a question, a demand. Harold Voss, Adrian said, Crownridge board member. Security found him at the bottom of the stairwell in the archive building an hour ago. Is he? He's dead. Adrian was already standing, already reaching for his coat, some old instinct toward decisive motion, overriding the numbness spreading through his chest. They're calling it an accident. Sophie was on her feet before he finished the sentence. Harold Voss, she said slowly, was the only person on that board who'd asked to see the original Ashcroft Kingston Bennett dissolution files this month. Neither of them said the word conspiracy. It hung in the room anyway, patient, willing to wait until they were ready to use it. They rode down together in an elevator neither of them had chosen to share, the silence stretching long enough that Adrian found himself studying her reflection in the polished brass doors rather than looking at her directly. The set of her jaw, the way she held her phone like a weapon she hadn't yet decided whether to use. He had built, over a decade, an entire professional identity out of never being caught off guard. Sophie Bennett had unbalanced him twice in a single afternoon, and he wasn't yet sure whether to resent it or respect it. My father used to say, your family collected grudges the way other people collected art, Sophie said, breaking the silence without looking at him. Expensively, and for display. My grandmother used to say, the Bennetts wore their outrage like a family crest, Adrian replied. Very old, very polished, not particularly useful in a crisis. And yet here we are, Sophie said. In a crisis, here we are. The elevator reached the lobby, and for a moment neither of them moved to step out, both of them suspended in the strange new understanding that whatever came next, they would not be facing it as strangers separated by old headlines, but as two people who had just watched the ground shift beneath both their families at once. I'll have my people send you everything on Voss's file access requests, Sophie said finally, stepping out first. By tonight, I'll do the same, Adrian said, and was faintly surprised to find he meant it. Chapter 2. The Stairwell. The archive building sat 3 blocks from either headquarters, a squat brick structure that had once been Ashcroft Kingston Bennett's records annex, and now belonged, on paper, to no one in particular, a leftover asset from a company that no longer existed, maintained by a skeleton staff, because no one had ever agreed on who should pay to tear it down. Sophie reached the scene 11 minutes after Adrian. She noted, with some irritation, that he'd already talked his way past the police tape. "You can't be in here," she told him, ducking under the tape herself. "Neither can you. I have a board member's family asking me questions I can't answer. That gets me further than a security badge." The stairwell smelled of dust and old paper. Harold Voss lay where he'd fallen, already covered, already photographed, already becoming a case number instead of a person. A detective named Ruiz, young, tired, unimpressed by either of their last names, informed them both, with the flat patience of someone who'd already had this argument twice that morning, that Mr. Voss appeared to have lost his footing on the third-floor landing. "Appeared to," Sophie repeated. "Ma'am, until the ME says otherwise. He was 71 years old and he'd walked those stairs twice a week for a decade," Adrian said. "He didn't lose his footing." Ruiz looked between them, clearly recalculating whatever assumptions she'd made about Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings hating each other. "You two know something I don't?" "We know," Sophie said, "that Mr. Voss requested access to sealed dissolution records from a company that stopped existing 25 years ago and did so 3 days before he died, in a building that stores exactly those records." That got Ruiz's attention, at least enough to write it down. They left together, which neither of them acknowledged as strange until they were half a block from the building, and Adrian realized he'd fallen into step beside her, without deciding to. "Your brother," he said, "Marcus. He works in your archives division." "He does? Why?" "Because someone broke into Kingston Global's records room last night. Nothing taken, as far as we can tell. But someone was in our system for 4 hours, and I want to know if the same thing happened to you." Sophie's phone was already in her hand. She'd meant to check messages on the way over, and hadn't had the chance. Now she saw 11 missed calls from Marcus, and a text sent 20 minutes ago. "Sophie, call me. Someone's been in the vault. Files are gone. Not copied. Gone." She showed Adrian the screen without meaning to, an instinct she'd examine later and regret. He read it, and went very still. "Which files?" he said. "He doesn't say. I'll call him now." Marcus picked up on the first ring, breathless in the particular way of someone who has been waiting by a phone. "It's the AKB dissolution boxes," he said, without preamble. "The original ones, financial statements, board minutes, the whole file on the $7 million transfer. Someone pulled the physical originals and wiped the digital backups the same night. How is that possible? Those backups are supposed to be air-gapped." "I don't know, Soph. But whoever did it knew exactly what to take and exactly how our systems work. This wasn't some kid selling corporate secrets. This was someone who used to work here." Sophie ended the call and found Adrian watching her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not distrust, not yet, but something adjacent to it, wary and searching. "Your files are gone," he said. "Mine were accessed, but nothing was removed. Which of those sounds more like a company covering its own tracks to you?" "Don't," Sophie said. "Don't you dare start that with me. Not today. I'm not accusing you of anything, Miss Bennett. I'm telling you what it looks like from the outside, because in about 6 hours, our boards are going to be asking exactly that question, and I'd rather hear the ugly version from you than from a Meridian press release." Her phone buzzed again before she could answer. A text from an unknown number, no name attached, sent to an account she used for almost nothing but internal legal filings, a number she would have sworn no outsider possessed. "Two families, one truth. Stop digging or join Harold Voss." She turned the screen toward Adrian without a word. He read it, and whatever careful distance he'd been keeping between them collapsed, quietly, in the space of that sentence. His own phone buzzed a moment later. Same message, same unlisted sender. "Well," Adrian said, and for the first time all day, something like dark humor moved behind his eyes. "It appears we've been invited to work together." That's not an invitation, Sophie said. That's a leash. Somebody wants us watching each other instead of watching them. Then let's disappoint them. Chapter 3. The Alliance. The Crown Ridge Trust Board convened an emergency session that afternoon. 7 directors crammed into a windowless room that smelled of coffee and anxiety. By the end of it, Adrian and Sophie had been handed, jointly, the single least enviable job in either company. Co-chairing an internal investigation into Harold Voss's death, the archive breach, and the accelerating Meridian takeover, with full authority to pull records from both Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings. This is absurd, Adrian told the room, though he was already reaching for the folder in front of him. We are business rivals. We are, by any reasonable definition, the last 2 people who should be trusted to investigate each other. Which is exactly why it has to be both of you, said the trust chairwoman, a silver-haired woman named Priya Anand, who had outlasted 6 CEOs on both sides of the family divide. Give it to one company alone, and the other will assume a cover-up no matter what you find. Give it to both of you, together, and neither family can claim the other rigged the result. Sophie hated that the logic was sound. She said so. I hate it too, Priya said. Welcome to the job. After the room emptied, Priya lingered at the table, watching Adrian gather his files with more care than the task required. You knew Harold Voss personally, didn't you? She said. It wasn't really a question. He gave me my first seat on this board 11 years ago, Adrian said. Told me I reminded him of my grandfather, back before any of this went wrong. I always assumed he meant that as a compliment. He did, Priya said. Harold didn't hand out comparisons like that lightly. He also told me, about a month ago, that he thought there were things about the old AKB collapse that had never been properly examined. I told him to be careful pulling on threads that old. I should have listened to my own advice and asked him what he meant, instead of simply warning him off. You think he told anyone else? I think, Priya said carefully, that a great many people in this city have spent 25 years assuming they already knew the answer to a question nobody actually investigated properly. Harold was the rare person still curious enough to ask it again. I'd be careful, Adrian, about who else might have noticed him doing that. She gathered her coat, pausing at the door. Whatever you find, bring it to this board whole. Don't let either family bury the parts that are inconvenient to them. That's how we got here in the first place. That evening, Adrian drove to his grandmother's house instead of home, a habit he'd fallen into more often since his father's stroke had left Richard Kingston present, but diminished, prone to long silences and shorter tempers, unable to be the person Adrian needed to ask the questions currently keeping him up at night. Eleanor Kingston was 83, and looked, most days, like she could still run the company better than her son or grandson combined. She met him at the door with the particular expression she reserved for moments she'd apparently been expecting. Harold Voss, she said, before he'd said a word. I heard. You knew him? I knew everyone from that era, Adrian. It was a small world before it broke into 2 smaller ones. She poured him tea he hadn't asked for, and sat across from him at the same table where he'd done homework as a boy. What do you want to know? Anything, everything. Someone erased the AKB dissolution files from Bennett's archive last night, and now a board member who'd requested those same files is dead at the bottom of a staircase. Eleanor's hands went still around her cup. For a long moment she said nothing, and Adrian recognized, with the discomfort of a man realizing his grandmother had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, that she was deciding how much to tell him. There was a third partner, she said finally, before it was Kingston against Bennett, before any of that. There was a group, 3 men, 3 families, 1 company, your grandfather, Edward Bennett's father, and a third man most people have long since forgotten existed. Who? His name doesn't matter yet, Eleanor said, which Adrian understood, even at the time, to mean it mattered enormously, and she wasn't ready to say it aloud. What matters is that when the company collapsed, everyone assumed it was a fight between two families. No one thought to ask what happened to the third. Grandmother, I've said enough for tonight. She reached across and took his hand, the gesture so uncharacteristically tender that it worried him more than anything she'd said. Be careful who you trust in that investigation, Adrian. The people closest to you are not always who you think they are. That was true 25 years ago. I see no reason to believe it isn't true now. He left with more questions than he'd arrived with, which was, he was beginning to suspect, going to be the pattern of the next several weeks of his life. Across the city, Sophie was having a considerably less cryptic but no less unsettling conversation with her brother, spread across the kitchen table of the apartment they'd shared since their parents' divorce made neither family home feel entirely like home. I want to know who else had vault access the night the files disappeared, Sophie said. I already checked. 4 people. Me, you, our head archivist, and… Marcus hesitated. And who? And Nathan Cole, Kingston Global's head of corporate security. He'd requested a courtesy intercompany access badge 2 months ago for the Crown Ridge audit. IT never revoked it after the audit closed. Sophie sat back slowly. Kingston's own security chief had access to our vault. On paper, yes. Doesn't mean he used it. No, Sophie agreed. But it means somebody with Adrian Kingston's own people could have walked into our building and out again without anyone blinking. She thought of Adrian's face that afternoon, the careful, wary way he'd watched her when he suggested Bennett Holdings might be covering its own tracks. I need to know if Adrian Kingston trusts this man. You're not seriously going to accuse his own head of security to his face. No, Sophie said. I'm going to find out everything about Nathan Cole before I say a word to anyone. Starting tomorrow. She did not sleep well that night. Neither, 3 miles away, did Adrian, who lay awake turning his grandmother's warning over and over, unable yet to guess how soon he would learn exactly how right she had been. Chapter 4. The Archive. The Ashcroft Kingston Bennett Records Annex, 3 days after Harold Voss's death, had become the strangest kind of neutral ground, a building neither company wanted to claim and neither could afford to abandon. Adrian and Sophie stood together in the third-floor stacks, surrounded by boxes that had not been opened by either family in over 2 decades. Someone doesn't want us here, Sophie said, running a finger along a shelf where a gap sat between 2 boxes like a missing tooth. Box 41, gone. What was in it? According to the index, correspondence between the 3 founding partners in the 6 months before dissolution. She frowned. 3, not 2. Adrian's grandmother's words came back to him unbidden. There was a 3rd partner. I need to find someone who was actually there, he said. Someone who remembers, not from a file, but from being in the room. That was how they ended up, an hour later, in the cluttered 4th-floor office of Victor Callahan, a retired investigative journalist who had spent 30 years covering the city's business pages, and the last 5 insisting, to any editor who would listen, that the Ashcroft Kingston Bennett collapse had never been properly explained. Kingston and Bennett? Victor said, looking between them with something between amusement and suspicion, in the same room. I never thought I'd live to see it. We need your files on the AKB dissolution, Sophie said. The real ones, not what got printed. Victor studied them both for a long moment, then went to a filing cabinet that looked older than either of them, and pulled out a folder thick with yellowed newsprint and handwritten notes. I've been trying to get someone to care about this story for 2 decades, he said. Everyone assumed it was a straightforward fraud case between 2 families who hated each other. Nobody wanted to hear that there might have been a 3rd man in the room who walked away clean while your fathers tore each other apart in the papers. Ashcroft, Adrian said slowly, remembering the tower where he and Sophie kept meeting, remembering the name etched over its door. The building where we've been holding our meetings. It's named for him. Walter Ashcroft, Victor confirmed. Financier. Founding partner of AKB, alongside your grandfather and your father, Miss Bennett. Well, your grandfather. Old money, older manners, the kind of man everyone in this city still speaks of fondly, mostly because almost no one remembers he was ever more than a philanthropist. He funded half the libraries and hospital wings in this county after AKB fell apart. Bought himself a very good reputation with what, in hindsight, looks like a very large amount of money from somewhere. You think he embezzled the 7 million, Sophie said. I think, Victor said, that I never found proof, and that not finding proof got 2 of my sources fired and one of them disappeared entirely. A junior accountant named Diane Reyes. She flagged irregularities in the AKB books 8 months before the collapse, got quietly pushed out, and vanished from public record about a year later. I always wondered if she saw something the rest of us didn't. Is she alive? Adrian asked. I have no idea, Victor said. I looked for years, but I'll tell you this. Whoever's coming after Crown Ridge now, with a shell company nobody can trace back further than 4 holding entities, is playing the exact same game somebody played 25 years ago. Divide 2 families, hide behind their fight, take what you want, while they're busy blaming each other. Sophie looked at Adrian. Adrian looked back, and for the first time since this had started, she saw something other than wariness in his face. A recognition, unwelcome and unavoidable, that they had both spent their entire adult lives hating the wrong people. We need everything you have on Walter Ashcroft, Adrian said, and on Diane Reyes. Victor closed the folder and held it against his chest for a moment before handing it over, like a man finally allowed to put down something he'd carried a very long way. Be careful, he said. Ashcroft's an old man now, mostly retired, mostly beloved. If he really did this once, and he's willing to do it again, he's had 25 years to get better at covering his tracks. And Box 41 isn't the only thing that's gone missing this week. My own notes on Reyes were broken into 2 nights ago. Nothing taken but a single folder, hers. Outside, the afternoon had turned overcast, the kind of gray that made the whole city look like it was holding its breath. Adrian and Sophie stood on the sidewalk in a silence that had, almost without their noticing, stopped being hostile. Your grandmother knows something, Sophie said. It wasn't a question. She said there was a third partner. She wouldn't say his name. Adrian exhaled slowly. I think she was protecting my father's memory of what happened, or protecting him from what actually happened. Then we need her to talk, Sophie said. Because whoever is running Meridian's takeover is running the same play that destroyed our families the first time. And I don't intend to lose my grandfather's company to a ghost. Adrian almost smiled at that, despite everything. Walter Ashcroft isn't a ghost, Miss Bennett. He's a man with an address. We start there. Before they left, Victor caught Adrian's arm at the door, his voice dropping low enough that Sophie, already halfway down the corridor, wouldn't hear. A word of caution, Victor said. I've chased this story for 20 years and gotten nowhere, in part because everyone I ever approached about Ashcroft assumed I was simply another bitter old newsman looking to tear down a good man's reputation. You two have something I never had: standing, resources, a legitimate reason to ask these questions without looking like you're settling a score. Don't waste that by moving too fast. If Ashcroft is what I think he is, he's had a quarter-century to prepare for exactly this conversation. He will not be surprised to see you coming. You think he's expecting us? I think a man who's spent 25 years building a spotless reputation on top of a fraud has spent at least some of that time imagining the day someone finally comes to collect, Victor said. I'd rather you go in with your eyes open than walk into his parlor thinking you have the advantage of surprise. Adrian nodded slowly, filing the warning away beside the rest of what the afternoon had given him: a name, a ghost of a motive, and the uncomfortable sense that the investigation he and Sophie had been handed was already further along, in some quarter, than either of them yet understood. Chapter 5. The Vineyard. Walter Ashcroft's estate sat 2 hours north of the city, a sprawl of vineyard and stone that looked, from the long gravel drive, like something transplanted from an older and gentler century. Adrian had expected, he wasn't sure what, a fortress maybe, something that matched the shape of the suspicion growing in his chest. Instead, he found an old man in a cardigan, pruning shears in hand, who greeted them both by name before they'd introduce themselves. Adrian Kingston, Walter said, setting down the shears and extending a hand spotted with age. You have your grandfather's eyes, and you must be Sophie Bennett. My, I never thought I'd see the two of you standing on my drive together. His smile was warm, rueful, the smile of a man remembering old friends long gone. I suppose you're here about poor Harold. Among other things, Sophie said. Come in. I have wine that's older than either of you, and considerably less complicated. The house was full of photographs, Walter younger, standing between two other men Adrian recognized instantly, his own grandfather, and a man who could only be Sophie's. Free friends, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at some joke lost to time. We were inseparable. In the beginning, Walter said, following Adrian's gaze. Your grandfathers and I built something extraordinary. It broke my heart when it fell apart. I've spent 25 years wondering if I could have stopped it, if I'd only seen what was happening between them sooner. What was happening between them? Adrian said carefully. Or what was happening to them? Walter's eyes flicked to him, something unreadable passing behind the pleasant, weathered face. An astute distinction. What do you mean by it? We found discrepancies, Sophie said. In the AKB books, someone diverted $7 million in the months before the collapse. Everyone assumed it was one family stealing from the other. We're no longer sure that's true. I see. Walter poured the wine slowly, giving himself time, Adrian thought, though for what he couldn't yet say. I won't pretend I don't understand the shape of what you're suggesting. I was the third partner. It would be natural to wonder about me. He met their eyes with what looked like real sorrow. I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times over the years. Was there something I missed? Something I should have caught? I was the finance man, after all. If anyone should have seen it coming, it was me. Did you? Adrian asked. See it coming? No, Walter said, and it might even have been true. By the time I understood how bad it had gotten, your families had already stopped speaking to each other, let alone to me. I withdrew from public business shortly after. It seemed the only decent thing to do. Step back, let the wound close, stop being a reminder of what we'd all lost. He looked out at his vineyard, rows of vines disappearing into the gray afternoon. I put what remained of my fortune into things that mattered more. Libraries, hospitals. I've tried to build something good out of the wreckage, since I couldn't fix what broke. It was, Adrian would think later, a masterful performance. If it was a performance at all. He left the estate with nothing concrete, no confession, no evidence, only the faint unsettled feeling of a man who has shaken hands with someone extremely good at being believed. They were both wrong to assume the danger had stayed behind at the vineyard. Sophie's office at Bennett Holdings was ransacked that same night. Not robbed, exactly, since nothing of obvious value was taken, but searched with a thoroughness that left every drawer open, every file overturned, the framed photograph of her grandfather knocked from the wall, and its backing pried loose, as though someone had been looking for something small enough to hide behind glass. Marcus found her standing in the wreckage of it at 7 the next morning, her face carefully blank in the way Sophie went blank when she refused to let herself feel something yet. They took your notes, he said, the ones on Ashcroft and Reyes. They didn't take them, Sophie said. They photographed them. Look. Nothing's actually gone, just moved. Someone wanted to know exactly what we know. Her phone buzzed. Adrian, this time, not the unknown number. Cole's badge accessed this floor at 2:14 this morning, the text read. I'm sorry. Sophie stood very still amid the wreckage of her office, staring at her brother's earlier theory, made suddenly, sickeningly concrete. Kingston Global's head of security had walked into her building in the middle of the night and gone through her files with the kind of care that only came from already knowing exactly what he was looking for. He's one of Adrian's, Marcus said quietly. Yes, Sophie said, and Adrian just told me himself. She looked at the message again and felt something in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but the smallest fracture in the wall she'd built against it. Which means either he's telling me the truth because he's on our side, or he's telling me the truth because he wants me to believe he is. She had no way, yet, of knowing which. She was beginning to hate how much that uncertainty had started to matter. Chapter 6. The Ledger. Adrian confronted Nathan Cole that morning in the security office on Kingston Global's second floor, a room full of monitors and the particular silence of a man who has already decided how much he's willing to admit. I want the truth. Nathan, were you in Bennett Holdings building last night? I was following a lead, Cole said, too quickly. There's been chatter about a breach on their end. I wanted to see if it connected to ours. You went through Sophie Bennett's private files. I was looking for evidence of who's behind Meridian. I didn't take anything. You photographed her notes. Cole's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, I've kept this company secure for 9 years. I don't appreciate being questioned like a suspect because Miss Bennett noticed a badge scan. Then start acting like a man with nothing to hide, Adrian said, and did not miss the flicker of something. Fear? Calculation, he couldn't yet tell which, that crossed Cole's face before it smoothed back into professional composure. He suspended Cole's building-wide access that afternoon, over the head of security's furious objections, and told no one but Sophie. They spent that evening, and most of the next 3 days in the 61st floor mediation suite, the neutral ground turning by increments into something like a war room. Papers from both companies' archives spread across every surface. Victor Callahan's decades of notes pinned to a corkboard someone had wheeled in from a supply closet. It was Sophie who found it, close to midnight on the third day, buried in a photocopy of an offshore banking disclosure that had been misfiled for 25 years in a box labeled, deceptively, miscellaneous correspondence. Adrian. Something in her voice made him cross the room immediately. Look at this. A wire transfer, dated 6 weeks before the AKB collapse, routed through a numbered account in a jurisdiction with famously relaxed disclosure laws. An account holder's name had been redacted in the original filing, a common enough practice for legitimate confidentiality reasons. But someone, at some point, had photocopied the document before the redaction was applied, and the photocopy had ended up, by administrative accident, in the wrong box. The name beneath the smudged black bar was Walter T. Ashcroft. $7 million, Sophie said quietly, tracing the figure with one finger. The exact amount that disappeared from AKB. It's not proof he stole it, Adrian said, though he could hear how thin that objection sounded even as he made it. It could be a legitimate transfer. A loan repayment, something unrelated. Then why redact it? Why has this specific document never surfaced in 25 years of investigation? When Victor Callahan tore this story apart, looking for exactly this, Sophie looked up at him, and there was something fierce and lit in her face that had nothing to do with anger at him, for once, and everything to do with anger at the man they'd shaken hands with 2 days earlier. Adrian, I think we just found him. He wanted to argue. He found, to his own quiet surprise, that he didn't want to argue with her at all. That somewhere in the last 3 days, without either of them deciding it, his instinct to doubt her had eroded into something closer to trust. It unsettled him more than the document did. "We need corroboration," he said instead. "One document isn't enough to accuse the most beloved philanthropist in the city of orchestrating a decades-old fraud. We need Diane Reyes. Victor's been trying to find her for years and failed. Victor's a journalist working alone. We have 2 companies worth of resources and a joint mandate from Crown Ridge's board." Adrian was already reaching for his phone. "Let's use them." It took Kingston Global's forensic accounting team 11 hours to trace Diane Reyes through a chain of maiden names, minor address changes, and one carefully unremarkable small business license to a coastal town 4 hours south, where she had, for the past 2 decades, run a modest bookkeeping practice under the name Diane Foster. Sophie stared at the address on the screen for a long moment before she spoke. She's been 4 hours away this entire time, hiding in plain sight, doing the exact job she was punished for doing too well the first time. "We should call ahead," Adrian said. "No." Sophie was already reaching for her coat. If she spent 25 years hiding, a phone call from a stranger claiming to be from Kingston Global or Bennett Holdings is exactly the kind of thing that would send her running again. "We go in person, tonight." Adrian looked at her, at the exhaustion in her face, the same exhaustion he felt in his own bones, 3 days of no sleep and mounting dread, and found himself, for the first time since this began, not calculating the risk of trusting her, but simply trusting her. "Tonight," he agreed. "I'll drive." They stopped once on the drive south, at a roadside diner lit up against the dark like a lantern, and sat across a cracked vinyl booth eating food neither of them tasted, too wound up to sleep and too far from the city to keep working. "Can I ask you something that has nothing to do with the case?" Sophie said, turning her coffee cup slowly on its saucer. "You can ask. I make no promises about an answer. Did you ever actually hate me? Before all this? Or was it always just something you'd inherited? The way you inherit a coat that doesn't quite fit, but you wear it anyway, because it's what's hanging by the door." Adrian considered the question with more honesty than he'd expected to give it. "I hated an idea of you," he said finally. "A version I'd built out of my father's grief and my grandfather's silence, long before I ever met the actual person. I don't think I hated you, specifically, until the first time we were in a room together, and you were exactly as sharp and unimpressed by me as I'd expected, and some old stubborn part of me decided that proved I'd been right all along." He shook his head slightly. "It didn't. It just proved you were good at your job. I've had to relearn that distinction more than once these past few weeks." "I did the same thing," Sophie admitted. "Built you into a symbol before I ever built you into a person. It's easier to hate a symbol. Symbols don't argue back, and they definitely don't drive 4 hours in the middle of the night to interview a witness with you." "An oversight on my part," Adrian said, and for a moment, tired and strange and far from either of their usual lives, something almost like real warmth passed between them, unhurried, uncomplicated by anything except the shared exhaustion of 2 people finally seeing each other clearly. Chapter 9. The coast. Diane Foster's house sat at the end of a narrow lane overlooking a gray, restless stretch of ocean, small and neat and utterly unremarkable. Exactly, Sophie thought, what a woman would build for herself if she never wanted to be noticed again. She answered the door, already wary, her hand braced against the frame, as though ready to close it the instant she didn't like what she saw. "I know who you are," she said, before either of them could speak. Her eyes moved between them. Kingston, Bennett, the 2 names she'd spent 25 years hoping never to hear in the same sentence again. "I've been expecting one of you for a long time. I didn't expect both." "Then you know why we're here," Adrian said. Diane studied them for a long moment, then stepped back from the door. "You'd better come in before someone sees you standing on my porch." Inside, over tea neither of them touched, Diane Reyes finally told the story she'd been carrying alone for a quarter century. I was the junior accountant on the AKB account, she said, 26 years old, thrilled to be there. I started noticing discrepancies about 8 months before everything fell apart. Small transfers, oddly timed, always just under whatever threshold would have triggered a formal audit. I brought it to my supervisor. He told me to drop it. Who was your supervisor? Sophie asked. A man named Preston Vale, Jr. at the time, ambitious, very close to Walter Ashcroft. I didn't think anything of the loyalty back then. Everyone was close to Walter. Diane's hands tightened around her cup. I didn't drop it. I kept a private set of notes, copies of the discrepancies, because some instinct told me I might need them someday. I was right, though it took 25 years to matter. Adrian went very still at the name. Preston Vale, the public face of Meridian Consolidated Holdings, the corporation currently trying to swallow both Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings whole. Preston Vale runs Meridian now, Adrian said. Diane's face went the color of old paper. Then it's happening again. What's happening again? Sophie asked, though some cold, sure part of her had already guessed. Walter always said the same thing to me, near the end, when I pushed too hard, Diane said. He said, some men spend their whole lives building something. Others spend their lives making sure no one notices what they've taken, while everyone's busy building. I thought it was philosophy. I understand now it was a confession he thought I was too naive to recognize. She set down her cup with a hand that had begun, faintly, to shake. The night before the collapse, I saw him in the server room, alone, after everyone else had gone home. I didn't think anything of it at the time. He had every right to be there. It was only later, going back through the security logs during the internal review, that I noticed the timestamp was wrong. 1161. There's no such time. Someone had altered the log by hand and made an error doing it. You reported this, Adrian said. I tried. No one wanted to hear it. Everyone had already decided the fight was between the Kingstons and the Bennetts. It was easier, cleaner, a story that made sense to people who wanted a villain they already half suspected. Within a month I was let go, quietly, generous severance, glowing reference, everyone very kind about it. Within 6 months I understood the kindness was a threat wearing a nicer coat. I changed my name, I moved. I told myself I was being paranoid for 25 years, and then 2 weeks ago a car followed me home from the grocery store for the first time in over 2 decades, and I stopped telling myself that. Sophie leaned forward. Do you still have your notes? The original discrepancies? I kept everything, Diane said. I was too frightened to destroy it, and too frightened to use it. It's in a safety deposit box, 3 towns over, under a name that isn't Foster or Reyes. She looked between them, and something in her face, 25 years of carried fear, finally finding somewhere to set itself down, began, cautiously, to unclench. I'll take you there tomorrow. I think I've been waiting 25 years for someone to finally ask. They left her house past midnight, the ocean invisible in the dark beyond her porch, only the sound of it against the rocks. Preston Vale, Sophie said, once they were back in the car. Ashcroft's man, 25 years ago and now. He's not the mastermind, Adrian said. He's the proxy. Whoever's really behind Meridian is still hiding exactly the way he hid the first time. Neither of them saw the sedan that had been parked, lights off, at the far end of the lane since before they'd arrived. It pulled out onto the coastal road a full 2 minutes after they did, keeping its distance, patient in the way of something that had been waiting a long time and was in no hurry now that it had finally found what it was looking for. Chapter 8. The Gala. The Crown Ridge Foundation's annual charity gala had been scheduled 8 months earlier, long before anyone had reason to dread it, and by the time it arrived, neither Adrian nor Sophie could afford to skip it without inviting exactly the kind of speculation they were trying to avoid. Smile, Sophie murmured, as they crossed the ballroom together, a united front for the cameras that had been photographing Kingston Bennett hostility for a decade and were visibly confused by its absence. "We're supposed to look like reluctant business partners, not people who've spent the last week hunting a murderer." "I am reluctant," Adrian said, and something in his tone made the corner of her mouth twitch despite everything. Preston Vale found them within the hour, exactly as they'd expected he would. A lean, silver-tongued man in his early 50s with the kind of handshake that lasted a half-second too long. "Mr. Kingston, Miss Bennett, what a pleasure to finally meet the both of you in person." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I do hope there are no hard feelings about Meridian's offer. Purely business, I assure you. We simply see value where others have let old history get in the way. Old history has a way of not staying old," Adrian said. Something flickered behind Vale's composure, there and gone so fast Sophie would have missed it if she hadn't been watching for exactly that. "Doesn't it just?" Vale said lightly, and excused himself a moment later, with the practiced ease of a man who'd learned long ago never to let a conversation run past the point of safety. Walter Ashcroft arrived close to 9, moving through the crowd with the unhurried warmth of a beloved elder statesman, stopping at every table, remembering every name, the picture of harmless benevolence that had apparently fooled an entire city for 25 years. "My dears," he said, finding them near the terrace doors, "I do hope your investigation into poor Harold is progressing. Such a tragedy." "It's progressing," Sophie said. "We found some interesting things in the old AKB records this week." If Walter felt any alarm, he didn't show it, a stillness so complete it was, in retrospect, its own kind of tell. "How wonderful," he said. "I do hope you'll share whatever you find. I've always wanted to understand what truly happened all those years ago." He drifted away a moment later, pausing at a nearby table to charm a pair of elderly patrons with a story about libraries he'd funded a decade earlier, and Sophie watched him go with a growing, uneasy certainty that she had just watched a man rehearse a version of himself so thoroughly he might have forgotten, somewhere along the way, that it wasn't real. "He didn't even blink," she murmured to Adrian. "I told him we'd found something in the old records, and he didn't blink." "Neither did you, when you said it," Adrian pointed out. "Maybe he's simply better at this than either of us gave him credit for. Or maybe he's exactly as rattled as we hoped, and simply better at hiding it than anyone we've dealt with so far." "Both, I think," Sophie said. "That's what worries me." Adrian felt his phone vibrate in his jacket pocket, a notification from Kingston Global's IT security team, flagging an intrusion attempt against his personal email account, initiated 11 minutes earlier, from an IP address inside the very ballroom they were standing in. "Someone's trying to get into my email," he said quietly. "Right now, from this room." Sophie scanned the crowd, the board members, the society photographers, the caterers moving between tables with trays of champagne, and felt, for the first time all evening, the particular vertigo of realizing a threat could be standing 3 feet away, smiling, and she would have no way to know it. "Nathan Cole," she said suddenly, spotting him near the coat check, still wearing his Kingston Global security credentials despite the suspension. "What is he doing here?" Adrian was already moving. He caught Cole's arm before the man reached the door. "I revoked your access 3 days ago." "I still have gala clearance," Cole said. "Too smooth, too fast. Standard security detail for the event, sir. Nothing improper." "Nothing improper," Adrian repeated. "And yet someone's attempting to breach my email from inside this building, the same night you show up uninvited." Cole's expression didn't change, but Sophie, watching closely, saw his weight shift almost imperceptibly toward the exit, the particular readiness of a man calculating how fast he could reach a door. "I think," Sophie said, low and even, "you should come with us to talk to hotel security. Now. Or I start explaining to every reporter in this room, Exactly why Kingston Global's head of security was photographing my private files at 2 in the morning. For a moment, Cole looked like he might run. Then, visibly, something in him deflated, and he let Adrian steer him toward a service corridor instead. Though neither of them would learn, until it was very nearly too late, that the true danger that night had never been Nathan Cole at all, but the 2 minutes of unwatched confusion his near escape had bought for someone else entirely. It was past 11 when Adrian's phone rang, an unfamiliar number, a voice he didn't recognize until the second sentence. "Mr. Kingston, this is Detective Ruiz. I need you and Ms. Bennett to get to Mercy General as fast as you can." A pause, freighted with the particular weight of news meant to be delivered gently and never quite managing it. "There's been an incident involving a woman named Diane Foster. A car forced her off the coastal road 2 hours ago. She's alive, but you need to come now, before whoever did this decides to finish the job." Chapter 9. Mercy General. The drive to the coast took 3 hours that felt like 10. Sophie spent most of it with her phone pressed to her ear, alternating between Marcus, Victor Callahan, and an increasingly evasive Detective Ruiz, while Adrian drove faster than he ever had in his life, and said very little, both of them held together by the same thin, urgent thread of fear. Diane Reyes lay in a hospital bed with a concussion, a fractured wrist, and the particular exhausted clarity of a woman who has just survived exactly the thing she spent 25 years dreading. "They ran me off the road on purpose," she told them, her voice thin but steady. "I saw the car before it hit me. It wasn't an accident. It waited until I was on the cliff stretch, where there was nowhere to go but down." "Did you see the driver?" Adrian asked. "No, but I know why it happened. I called my safety deposit boxes branch this afternoon to arrange access for tomorrow, like I told you I would. I said your names on the phone." Her eyes filled, more with anger than fear. Someone was listening. Somewhere between that phone call and tonight, someone decided I needed to disappear before I could hand over what I've been keeping. "The bank," Sophie said. "We need to get there before anyone else does." "Not tonight," Adrian said. "Not while whoever did this might still be watching. We go in daylight, with police, and we don't say a word about it to anyone who doesn't already know." Detective Ruiz met them in the hospital corridor an hour later, her earlier skepticism entirely gone, replaced by the focus of someone finally taking a case as seriously as it deserved. "The vehicle that hit her was reported stolen 2 days ago," she said. "Wiped clean, professional job. Whoever did this isn't some corporate goon with a grudge. This is someone who's done this kind of thing before." "Nathan Cole," Sophie said. "He was at the gala tonight." "He could have." "Cole was in a holding room with hotel security from 10:40 until we released him at midnight," Ruiz said. "I already checked. He didn't run anyone off a coastal road 200 miles away." Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. "Then he's not acting alone. Someone else is doing the parts he can't." "Preston Vale left the gala at 9:40, Sophie said slowly. "Before Cole's confrontation, before we even found out about Diane. Vale's a corporate frontman," Adrian said. "He doesn't run people off roads himself. He has people for that." He looked at Ruiz. "We need protection on Diane Reyes, 24 hours, and we need it now." "Already arranged," Ruiz said. "I've also got a question for the two of you, since apparently you've become an investigative team without informing the department. Who is Walter Ashcroft, and why does his name keep coming up every time I pull a thread on this case?" Sophie and Adrian exchanged a look, the look, by now familiar, of two people deciding together how much to say. "He was the third founding partner of Ashcroft Kingston Bennett," Adrian said. 25 years ago, our family's companies split apart amid accusations of fraud. We believe now that fraud was his, and that he engineered the collapse to hide it. letting our grandfathers destroy each other's reputations while his own remained spotless. And now? Now someone's running an identical play through a company called Meridian, using a man who was Ashcroft's protege 25 years ago as the public face, Sophie said. We think it's the same operation, same money, laundered and grown for a quarter century, coming back to finish what it started. Ruiz was quiet for a long moment. That's a hell of a theory for two corporate executives to be running on their own. It's not a theory anymore, Adrian said. Not after tonight. They stayed at Diane's bedside until dawn, taking turns keeping watch, and somewhere in the small hours, exhausted past the point of pretense, Sophie found herself resting her head briefly against Adrian's shoulder, without either of them commenting on it. It was not romance. Not yet. Not exactly. It was simpler and older than that. The particular gravity of two people who had discovered, under threat, that they trusted each other more than they trusted almost anyone else left standing. We're close, she said quietly. I can feel it, which means whoever's doing this knows we're close too. Then we finish it, Adrian said, before they finish us. Marcus arrived at the hospital just after sunrise, having driven through the night the moment Sophie called him, and found his sister asleep in a plastic chair with her head against Adrian Kingston's shoulder, both of them still fully dressed from the gala the night before. He said nothing about it at the time, though he would bring it up, gently, more than once in the months that followed. You look terrible, he told Sophie instead, once she'd woken, pressing a coffee into her hands. Thank you, she said. It's been an eventful night. I heard Diane's going to be all right. Bruised, frightened, furious, once the fear wears off enough to leave room for it. Sophie glanced toward the hospital bed, where Diane had finally drifted into real sleep under police guard. She spent 25 years being careful, Marcus. And it still nearly got her killed the moment she started trusting the wrong people with a phone call. Not the wrong people, Marcus said quietly. Just the wrong phone line. There's a difference. You didn't do this to her. Whoever's been listening did. Sophie let that sit for a moment, grateful, not for the first time, for a younger brother who somehow always knew which comfort she actually needed, rather than the one that was easiest to offer. I need you to go back to the archives today, she said, quietly. I want a full list of every person who's had physical or digital access to the AKB dissolution files in the last 5 years, not just the last month. If someone's been watching this story for that long, I want to know exactly how long. On it, Marcus said, already reaching for his phone. Get some real sleep, Soph. You're no good to Diane or to Adrian Kingston, running on hospital coffee and adrenaline. Is that an opinion about my working relationship with Adrian Kingston? It's an opinion about your health, Marcus said, with the particular innocence of a much younger sibling who knows exactly what he's implying. Everything else, you can tell me about later, when you're ready, no rush. Chapter 10. What Cole knew. Nathan Cole was waiting for them at Kingston Global's headquarters 2 days later, in an office he no longer had the clearance to occupy, a resignation letter already typed and sitting on the desk. I want to talk before I disappear, he said, when Adrian found him there. You should hear it from me, instead of guessing the worst version. Start talking, Adrian said. I was recruited 18 months ago, not by Vale, by someone underneath him, feeding money through a consulting arrangement that looked, on paper, entirely legitimate. I was paid to report on Crown Ridge Trust's internal deliberations, nothing more, I told myself, just information, not sabotage. Cole's hands were unsteady. I didn't know about Harold Voss until it had already happened. I swear to you, I didn't know it would go that far. But you kept working for them anyway, Sophie said, arriving in time to hear the last of it. By then I was in too deep to walk away clean. They had records of what I'd already given them. I told myself I was managing the damage, staying close enough to steer them away from anything worse. Cole looked between them, something like genuine shame breaking through the practiced calm. "I photographed your files, Miss Bennett, because I was ordered to confirm what you'd already found. I broke Victor Callahan's office lock myself, looking for his notes on Diane Reyes. I am not proud of any of it." "Who gave the orders?" Adrian asked. "Not Vale directly. Never Vale directly. Always through an intermediary, a woman named Renata Kessler, who I now understand works for a private security consultancy, retained by Meridian's largest anonymous shareholder. I never met that shareholder. I don't think anyone below Vale has." "Anonymous shareholder," Sophie repeated. "Someone hiding behind Meridian's own corporate structure, the same way they hid behind Ashcroft's name 25 years ago." "There's something else," Cole said. "The night Diane Reyes was run off the road, I was in a holding room at the gala, exactly like the detective told you. But I got a message from Kessler an hour before it happened. Just 3 words: handle the coast." His voice dropped. "I didn't send that order, but I knew, the moment I read it, exactly what it meant, and I didn't warn anyone in time. That's on me. All of it is on me." He handed Adrian a phone, a second device, separate from his own, containing 18 months of messages between himself and Renata Kessler. "This is everything," Cole said. "Every instruction, every payment. It's not enough to name whoever's really behind Meridian, but it's enough to prove Vale's operation has been running a coordinated campaign against Crown Ridge Trust, and it corroborates whatever Diane Reyes gives you from her safety deposit box." "Why hand this over now?" Sophie asked. "Why not just disappear?" Cole's laugh was short and humorless. "Because a man died on my watch, Miss Bennett, and another woman nearly did, and I have spent 18 months telling myself I was the reasonable one in a bad situation. I'm not interested in telling myself that anymore." He stood, straightening his jacket with the automatic dignity of a man performing his own quiet ending. "I'll cooperate with whatever investigation follows. I imagine that's the least I owe anyone at this point." He left the building an hour later, flanked by Kingston Global's legal counsel and, discreetly, Detective Ruiz, and neither Adrian nor Sophie saw him again for some time. That afternoon, with Cole's phone in an evidence bag and Diane Reyes's safety deposit box, finally, carefully opened under police supervision, the 2 threads of the investigation converged into something neither of them had quite been ready to see whole. Diane's original ledgers, painstakingly copied by hand 25 years earlier, matched the redacted wire transfer Sophie had found in the archive almost to the dollar. Cole's messages traced Meridian's harassment campaign back through 3 shell entities to a private trust registered, decades ago, under a name that had been dormant on paper ever since. "E. Ashcroft Family Trust?" "It's him," Sophie said, staring at the paperwork spread across the war room table. "It was always him." She sat down slowly, the weight of it settling over her, in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour, and everything to do with a lifetime's worth of inherited certainty finally collapsing at once. "My grandfather spent the rest of his life believing your grandfather betrayed him. He wrote it into his will, Adrian. There's a clause, I've never told anyone this, specifically forbidding any Bennett descendant from entering into partnership with a Kingston, under any circumstances, for as long as Bennett Holdings exists. I grew up thinking that clause was a kind of inheritance, a warning passed down to protect me." She laughed, short and without much humor in it. "It wasn't protection, it was just grief, calcified into legal language, aimed at exactly the wrong family." "My father has something similar," Adrian admitted. "Not written down, just understood. The Kingstons do not do business with the Bennetts. I was raised on that sentence the way other children are raised on nursery rhymes." He looked at the documents spread across the table, at the name that had finally surfaced after 25 years of careful hiding. "I keep thinking about all the years both of our families spent building higher and higher walls against each other. when the person who actually took something from us was standing on the other side of both walls the entire time, watching us do exactly what he needed us to do. "We are going to have to tell them," Sophie said. "Both of our fathers, your grandmother. It's going to break something in all of them, hearing this. It's going to break something that was already broken," Adrian said quietly. "I think that might be the only way it ever gets the chance to heal properly." Adrian said nothing for a long moment, thinking of an old man in a cardigan, pruning shears in hand, warmly reminiscing about friends he claimed to have loved. "Then we're not just fighting a hostile takeover anymore," he said finally. "We're about to accuse the most respected man in this city of murder." Chapter 11. The Grandmother's Truth. Eleanor Kingston listened to everything they had, sitting very straight in her favorite chair, her hands folded in her lap in a stillness Adrian recognized as the same stillness she'd worn the night Harold Voss died, the stillness of a woman finally facing something she had spent 25 years holding at bay. "You already knew," Adrian said, when she didn't speak right away. "Not suspected, knew. I saw him," Eleanor said quietly, "the night before everything collapsed. I'd come to the office to bring your grandfather his dinner. He'd been sleeping there for a week, working himself sick trying to find the source of the discrepancies. I saw Walter in the server room, alone, at 11:30. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? He belonged there as much as anyone. But later," Sophie said gently, "you understood what you'd seen. Later, when the investigators pulled the security logs and found that impossible timestamp, I understood exactly what I'd seen, and exactly what it meant, and I said nothing." Eleanor's voice had gone thin, but it did not waver. "Do you understand why, Adrian? Your grandfather was already drowning in suspicion. Edward Bennett was already convinced he'd been robbed by his oldest friend. If I'd stood up and said I saw Walter Ashcroft in that server room, at the exact hour the logs were altered, do you know what would have happened? People would have believed you," Adrian said. "Perhaps. Or perhaps they would have decided I was covering for your grandfather by inventing a scapegoat, and the accusation would have destroyed what little was left of his name along with everyone else's." Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. Walter Ashcroft was, by then, already becoming a legend of quiet generosity. Who would take an accountant's daughter's word over a philanthropist's reputation? "I made a choice, Adrian. I chose to protect what remained of your grandfather's dignity, rather than gamble it on an accusation I couldn't yet prove. I have lived with that choice for 25 years, and I will tell you honestly, I am no longer certain it was the right one." "You could have told me," Adrian said, and there was real hurt in it now, the accumulated hurt of a childhood spent believing a simpler, uglier story about his own family's history. "I grew up believing the Bennetts destroyed us. I built half my adult life around that belief." "I know," Eleanor said, and for the first time Adrian saw actual tears in his grandmother's eyes. "I told myself I was protecting you from a truth too dangerous to carry. I understand now that I was only delaying the day you'd have to carry it anyway, and making the weight heavier by waiting. I'm sorry, Adrian. I am so sorry." Sophie, who had been quiet through most of this, found herself unexpectedly moved, not toward the Kingston family's grief exactly, but toward the shape of it, so precisely the mirror of her own. "My grandfather went to his own grave, believing Richard Kingston stole from him," she said quietly. "He never once, in 20 years, considered any other possibility. I don't know if that's better or worse than knowing and staying silent." "It is worse," Eleanor said, with sudden fierce certainty. "Believe me, Miss Bennett, it is far worse to die still hating the wrong person than to live carrying a guilty silence. At least a silence can still, eventually, be broken." "Will you say this publicly?" Adrian asked. "Will you testify to what you saw?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, looking between her grandson and the granddaughter of the man her family had wrongly blamed for 25 years, and something in her face settled. Finally, into resolve. "Yes," she said. "I have carried this long enough. Let Walter Ashcroft explain his own server room, for once, instead of letting two families explain it for him." It was, Adrian would think later, the first moment the investigation stopped feeling like an unraveling and started feeling like a reckoning, the moment the truth, so long buried under two families' inherited hatred, finally began finding its way, slowly and at great cost, back into the light. Sophie stayed a while after Adrian had gone to sit with his father, helping Eleanor clear the tea service in a kitchen that still, after everything, felt like enemy territory to some old, stubborn part of her. "You didn't have to stay," Eleanor said, not unkindly. "I wanted to," Sophie said, and found, somewhat to her own surprise, that it was true. "My grandfather spent his whole life believing your family destroyed his. I spent a lot of years believing it alongside him, without ever questioning it myself. I think I needed to hear you say what you just said, as much as Adrian did." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, the particular assessing look of a woman who had outlived most of her contemporaries and trusted her own judgment of character more than she trusted headlines. "You're sharper than your grandfather was, Miss Bennett. He was a good man, but he never once questioned the story he'd been told. You've questioned everything since the moment you walked into this mess. That's rarer than you might think, in families like ours." "Families like ours," Sophie repeated. "I'm not sure I know what that means anymore." "Neither do I," Eleanor admitted, with the ghost of a smile. "I suppose that's rather the point of the last 25 years finally being over." Chapter 12, The Lodge. With Eleanor's willingness to testify, now a matter of record, and Nathan Cole's evidence sitting with Detective Ruiz's department, the danger around Adrian and Sophie sharpened rather than eased. Priya Anand, watching both of them run on too little sleep and too much adrenaline, insisted they disappear somewhere quiet for 48 hours while the Crown Ridge Board's lawyers prepared to move against Meridian's takeover vote. "You're no good to this investigation, dead," she told them bluntly. "Go to ground. Let us handle the paperwork." Adrian chose his family's lodge, a modest cedar structure, tucked into the mountains 3 hours from the city, reachable only by a single unpaved road that made any approaching vehicle audible 10 minutes before it arrived, the closest thing to safety either of them could currently imagine. They spent the first evening in something close to a truce with their own exhaustion, building a fire neither of them strictly needed, the mountain air sharp and clean after weeks of boardrooms and hospital corridors. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said, watching the flames. 25 years of hating my family. Does any of it feel different now?" Adrian considered the question honestly, which was, he thought, the least he owed her at this point. "All of it feels different," he said. "I spent my whole life believing my father's failures were your grandfather's fault. That the reason he became a smaller man than he should have been was because someone took something from him and never gave it back. Finding out that might not be true doesn't erase the years. It just means I grieved the wrong villain for a very long time. I used to imagine your grandfather as a kind of monster," Sophie admitted. "A cartoon. It made it easier to hate him without complication. It's harder to hate someone once you understand he might have been as deceived as your own family was." "Is it easier or harder to trust me now?" Adrian asked, and hadn't quite meant to ask it aloud. Sophie considered this with the same careful honesty she brought to everything. "Harder," she said finally, "because trusting you means admitting how much energy I spent, for years, making sure I never had to." They didn't speak of anything more than that night, not because there was nothing more to say, but because both of them understood, without needing to discuss it, that whatever was growing between them deserved to be built on solid ground, rather than the shifting, adrenaline-soaked uncertainty of an ongoing investigation. It was Sophie, in the end, who said what neither of them was quite ready to name. "Let's survive this first." Then we can figure out what we are to each other." Adrian's phone rang at just past midnight, shattering the fragile calm. "Marcus," his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Someone tried to break into the safety deposit box branch tonight," he said. "After hours. Alarm triggered," police responded. "Whoever it was got away before they arrived. The branch manager says the box itself wasn't touched, but the outer vault door shows tool marks. Diane's records are safe? For now. But whoever's behind this knows exactly where that box is, which means Cole's confession or something else leaked." Sophie, listening on speaker, felt the fragile peace of the evening evaporate entirely. "Renata Kessler," she said, "or whoever she answers to. They're not backing off. If anything, they're accelerating." "The shareholder vote," Adrian said grimly. "It's in 4 days. They need this settled before then, one way or another." "Then so do we," Sophie said, already reaching for her coat despite the hour, despite the mountain dark outside the windows. 4 days to prove Walter Ashcroft murdered Harold Voss and orchestrated a fraud that's lasted a quarter century. No pressure. We have Eleanor's testimony. We have Cole's messages. We have Diane's ledgers, assuming that vault holds. Adrian was already pulling up his contacts, dread and determination fighting for space in his chest in roughly equal measure. It might be enough. It has to be enough. Outside, far below the lodge's single narrow road, a pair of headlights swept briefly across the tree line and then went dark, close enough that neither of them, wrapped in their own urgent planning, noticed it at all. Chapter 13, The Garage. They returned to the city the next morning to find Victor Callahan waiting for them in the underground parking garage beneath Kingston Global's headquarters, his usual rumpled composure replaced by something taut and urgent. "I tried calling," he said, falling into step beside them as they crossed toward the elevators. "I think I've found the connection that ties Ashcroft directly to Meridian's ownership structure, not through Vale, through a trust registered in the Ashcroft family name that quietly holds 41% of Meridian's parent entity." 41%. Sophie repeated. "That's controlling interest. It's buried under 4 shell layers, but yes." Victor pulled a folder from his bag. "I need you to look at this before I..." The garage lights went out. All of them, all at once. The entire sublevel plunged into a darkness so complete and so sudden that Sophie's first thought was equipment failure, and her second thought, arriving half a second later, was considerably more frightening. "Move," Adrian said, low and urgent, his hand finding her arm in the dark. Now, they heard footsteps before they saw anything, measured, unhurried, coming from the direction of the exit ramp, the particular confidence of someone who knew exactly where the 3 of them were standing and exactly how few ways out of that sublevel existed. Victor's phone flashlight clicked on, throwing a thin beam across concrete pillars and parked cars, and in that brief illumination, Sophie saw a figure at the far end of the garage, tall, unhurried, deliberately unafraid of being glimpsed. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Kingston." The voice was Renata Kessler's, calm and almost pleasant, carrying easily across the concrete expanse. "I'd hoped we might avoid this. You've made that considerably more difficult than necessary." "There's nothing left to hide," Adrian called back, his voice steadier than Sophie felt. "We have Cole's messages. We have the wire transfer. We have a witness who saw Walter Ashcroft in that server room the night the timestamp was altered. It's over, whoever you're working for." "Is it?" Kessler said, and there was something almost sorrowful in her tone, the professional regret of someone who took no particular pleasure in what came next, but wouldn't hesitate over it either. "A pity? I do admire persistence, in the abstract." The flashlight beam caught something metallic in her hand, and Victor, closest to her, took an involuntary step back into the shadow of a concrete pillar. What happened next happened fast enough that Sophie would only reconstruct it clearly later, piece by piece, in the quiet aftermath, the emergency lighting flickering back to life exactly as building security, alerted by Adrian's silent panic signal sent the moment the lights failed, came pouring down the exit ramp, Kessler turning, weighing her remaining options in the space of a single heartbeat, and choosing the one door still open to her, rather than a confrontation she could no longer win. The screech of tires as a car she'd left running 2 levels up carried her out of the garage and into traffic before anyone could stop her. They were left standing in restored fluorescent light, breathing hard, Victor's folder still clutched to his chest, the 3 of them very much alive and entirely certain, for the first time, that the danger around them was no longer theoretical. "She would have used that on one of us," Victor said, his voice shaking now that the adrenaline had space to become something else. "If security hadn't come when they did, she still might, before this is over," Adrian said grimly. "Which means we move faster than they expect, not slower." He looked at Sophie, and something passed between them that had nothing left in it of rivalry, nothing left of the careful distance either of them had once maintained. 4 days until the vote, we use every one of them. Detective Ruiz arrived 20 minutes later to find a garage full of unsettled security guards, 1 badly shaken journalist, and 2 corporate executives who had apparently decided, somewhere in the last several minutes, to stop being careful and start being fast. "I want a warrant for Walter Ashcroft's estate," Adrian told her, before she'd even finished surveying the scene. "Today, we have motive, we have a witness, we have financial evidence, and we just watched his hired enforcer try to silence 3 more of us in broad daylight. How much more do you need?" Ruiz studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll take it to the DA within the hour," she said. "But you should know, a man like Ashcroft doesn't go down quietly, and he's had 25 years to plan exactly how he'd handle this moment if it ever came. Whatever happens next, it isn't going to be simple." She was right, though none of them yet understood how right, or how close they were about to come to losing everything, in the attempt to finally set it right. Victor Callahan sat in his cluttered office late that night, his hands still faintly unsteady, around a glass of whiskey he'd poured but not yet touched, and looked at the folder that had nearly gotten all 3 of them killed. 30 years, he said, when Adrian stopped by to check on him. 30 years chasing this story, and I finally get close enough to finish it. And it turns out finishing it means standing in a dark parking garage while a professional decides whether it's worth killing a journalist to keep a secret buried. "You could walk away," Adrian said. "No one would blame you." Victor looked at him for a long moment, and something in his tired, weathered face hardened into the same stubborn resolve Adrian recognized from Eleanor, from Diane, from Sophie herself. The particular resolve of people who had spent too long being told to stop asking questions and had finally decided they were done listening. "I've spent half my career watching powerful men get away with things because everyone around them agreed it was safer not to look too closely," Victor said. "I'm 68 years old, Mr. Kingston. If I walk away now, I'll have spent my entire life proving the exact point Walter Ashcroft is counting on. That eventually, everyone gets tired and goes home." He finally drank the whiskey, set the glass down with a decisive click. "I'm not going home. Tell Miss Bennett I'll have the story ready the moment your board gives the word." Adrian left the office with something that felt, for the first time in weeks, less like dread and more like momentum, the sense that the truth, so long outmatched by 25 years of careful silence, had finally gathered enough voices behind it to become unstoppable. Chapter 14, The Race. The warrant came through late that night, but by the time Detective Ruiz's team reached the Vineyard estate the following morning, Walter Ashcroft was gone, his house locked, his staff dismissed with generous severance the day before, as though he had been preparing his own quiet exit for some time, and had simply been waiting for the right moment to take it. "He knew," Sophie said, standing in the empty hallway lined with photographs of three young men who had once believed themselves inseparable. He knew before we did that it was coming. Renata Kessler warned him after the garage, Adrian said. Or he simply had contingencies ready for 25 years. The way a man plans for a fire he always knew he might someday have to survive. What they found instead of Ashcroft himself was, in its way, almost as valuable, a locked study containing a second, private set of financial records, less carefully hidden than the ones layered through Meridian's shell companies, as though Ashcroft had never quite believed anyone capable of following the trail this far, and had grown careless in his confidence. The records confirmed everything Diane Race's ledgers and Cole's messages had already suggested, and added a final, damning detail neither of them had anticipated. A handwritten note, dated the week before Harold Voss's death, instructing Preston Vale to ensure Voss no longer had access to the AKB dissolution files by whatever means necessary. By whatever means necessary, Adrian read aloud, his voice flat with barely contained fury. He wrote it himself. He didn't even bother disguising his handwriting. 25 years of never being questioned does that to a man, Sophie said. He forgot he needed to be careful. With the shareholder vote now less than 72 hours away, and Ashcroft's whereabouts unknown, the Crownridge board convened an emergency session that stretched past midnight. Priya Anand, steering a room of frightened, furious directors through the single most consequential decision any of them had ever faced. We have enough to petition for an emergency injunction against Meridian's tender offer, Marguerite Oyalaren told the room, on the grounds that the acquiring entity's beneficial ownership was concealed through fraud, connected to an active homicide investigation. It won't hold forever, but it buys us time. Time for what? A director asked. Ashcroft's in the wind. Vale will simply claim ignorance of his silent partner's crimes and walk away clean. Not if we make it impossible for anyone to look away, Sophie said, and something in her voice made the entire room turn toward her. We have Eleanor Kingston's eyewitness testimony. We have Diane Reyes's original ledgers. We have Nathan Cole's cooperation and Renata Kessler's attempted assault caught on Kingston Global's own security footage. We don't need Walter Ashcroft in the room to expose him. We need the world to see everything, all at once, before the vote. Before Meridian's lawyers have time to bury this in procedure and delay. You're talking about going public, Priya said slowly, before the police have made an arrest. I'm talking about making an arrest unavoidable, Sophie said. Victor Callahan has spent 30 years building the exact platform we need. Let him publish everything, the ledgers, the timestamp, Eleanor's account, all of it, the same day as the shareholder vote. Let every investor deciding whether to hand their shares to Meridian read, in the same morning's paper, exactly whose money they'd be handing them to. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and in his face was something that had, by now, entirely replaced the wary distrust of their first meeting. A fierce and total confidence that whatever came next, he wanted to face it standing beside her, rather than across some table from her. Do it, he said. All of it. Let him bring the truth into daylight, where a jury of shareholders and a jury of the public can both see it at once. The board authorized the disclosure just after 2 in the morning. Victor Callahan received the full file 40 minutes later and did not sleep again until the story was written. Somewhere, in a location none of them yet knew, Walter Ashcroft was, at that same hour, making the last calculations of a very long con, deciding, with the same cold precision that had once altered a security timestamp by a single impossible minute, exactly how far he was willing to go to keep the truth from finally catching up with him. Chapter 15, The Reckoning. Victor Callahan's story broke online at 6 that morning, 26 hours before the shareholder vote, under a headline that would be quoted in every business publication in the country by the end of the week. The third partner. It laid out, in careful, sourced, unimpeachable detail, the entire architecture of Walter Ashcroft's quarter-century fraud, the original embezzlement, the manufactured feud between two grieving families, the shell companies feeding stolen money quietly into legitimate philanthropy, and finally, the resurrection of the scheme through Meridian Consolidated Holdings and a man named Preston Vale, who had spent his entire career as somebody else's instrument. By 7, Meridian stock had begun sliding. By 9, 3 major institutional shareholders had publicly withdrawn their support for the tender offer. By 11, Preston Vale had resigned as Meridian's chief executive, releasing a statement claiming, with what struck almost everyone as unconvincing haste, complete ignorance of his patron's crimes. Walter Ashcroft surfaced himself, in the end, not because he was caught, but because he seemed, even then, unable to resist one final performance. He walked into Crownridge Trust's headquarters just before noon, alone, unhurried, dressed as impeccably as he had been the day Adrian and Sophie had visited his vineyard, and asked, with perfect composure, to speak to the board. "I understand there's a story circulating," he said, once he'd been shown, against the frantic objections of building security, into the very boardroom where the whole crisis had begun weeks earlier. Adrian and Sophie were both there, along with Priya Anand, Marguerite Oyalaran, and, standing quietly by the door, with an expression of grim satisfaction, Detective Ruiz. "I thought I might offer my perspective before anyone rushes to judgment." "There's no judgment left to rush toward, Walter," Eleanor Kingston said, rising from her seat at the far end of the table, where she had been waiting, by her own quiet insistence, for exactly this moment. "I saw you in that server room 25 years ago. I've spent a quarter century regretting my silence. I don't intend to spend a single day more." For the first time since Adrian had met him, something in Walter Ashcroft's composure genuinely cracked. "Eleanor," he said, and his voice, for just a moment, sounded almost human, almost pleading. "You don't understand what it cost me, watching what I built fall apart." "What you built," Sophie said coldly, "was never yours to lose. You stole it, Mr. Ashcroft, from 2 men who trusted you, and then you let them destroy each other for 25 years, so no one would ever look closely enough to notice what you'd taken. I gave this city hospitals, libraries. I did more good with that money than either of your families would ever have managed alone. You did good with stolen money to buy yourself a reputation you never earned," Adrian said, and his voice, when it came, held none of the composed neutrality he'd built his entire career on. Only 25 years of misdirected grief, finally finding its rightful target. "My father spent the rest of his life believing he'd been robbed by his oldest friend. He died still believing it. You let that happen because it was convenient for you." Ashcroft looked around the room, at Eleanor's unwavering resolve, at Detective Ruiz's waiting patience, at Adrian and Sophie standing, for the first time in either family's memory, entirely on the same side of the table, and something in him seemed, finally, to understand that there was no performance left capable of changing what came next. "I never meant for Harold to die," he said quietly, and it was, in its way, the closest thing to a confession any of them would get. "That was Vale's doing, and Kessler's, a decision made without my knowledge, in the panic of trying to protect what I'd built. I want that understood. You built a system that made his death inevitable the moment he asked the wrong question," Sophie said. "Whether you gave the order yourself hardly matters now." Detective Ruiz stepped forward at last. "Walter Ashcroft, you're under arrest in connection with the death of Harold Voss, and on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and financial crimes spanning 25 years. You have the right to remain silent." He did not resist. He simply stood, straightened his jacket with the same unhurried dignity he'd carried through every room he'd ever entered, and allowed himself to be led out past 2 families who had spent a quarter century hating each other for a crime that had never been theirs at all. Shareholder vote, held the following afternoon, rejected Meridian's tender offer by an overwhelming margin. Crownridge Trust survived. Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings, for the first time in 25 years, stood on the same side of a fight and won it together. Chapter 16. After the storm. The weeks that followed felt, to Adrian, like learning to walk again after an injury he hadn't fully registered until it began to heal. Preston Vale, facing charges of his own, agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for leniency, filling in the last remaining gaps of Ashcroft's 25-year operation. Renata Kessler was arrested attempting to cross the northern border 11 days after the garage confrontation, her employer's name, Ashcroft, always Ashcroft, hidden behind one shell after another, finally, fully exposed. Nathan Cole's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence and, in a small mercy none of them had expected to feel, something like Adrian's forgiveness, though not his trust. Diane Reyes, Diane Foster no longer, she'd decided, ready at last to reclaim the name she'd given up 25 years earlier, testified before a grand jury with a steadiness that impressed even Detective Ruiz. "It's strange," she told Sophie afterward, "how much lighter it feels to finally be believed." Eleanor Kingston gave her own testimony 3 days later, in a courtroom packed with reporters who had spent decades treating the Kingston-Bennett feud as reliable entertainment, and were now, visibly, recalculating everything they thought they'd understood about it. "I regret my silence," Eleanor told the court, in words that would be quoted for years afterward. "But I do not regret, finally, breaking it." Adrian and Sophie spent most of those weeks in the strange, exhausting work of rebuilding, not just Crownridge Trust's shaken finances, but the two companies themselves, each newly forced to reckon with a history neither family had understood correctly for a quarter century. "My father is different," Adrian told Sophie one evening, in the mediation suite that had, by unspoken agreement, become something other than neutral ground between enemies. "I told him everything. About Ashcroft, about the timestamp, about what actually happened that night. I've never seen him cry before, not once, my whole life." "How is he now?" "Lighter, I think." The way Diane described it, Adrian looked at her, and something in his chest, which had spent a lifetime armored against exactly this kind of vulnerability, simply let go. "I spent 36 years believing your family destroyed mine. I don't know how to be a person who doesn't believe that anymore. I'm having to relearn who I am without it." "I know," Sophie said. "I'm relearning the same thing." She hesitated, then added, with the careful honesty that had become, over these weeks, the foundation of whatever they were building between them. "I don't want to go back to being your rival, Adrian. I don't think I could, even if I tried. But I also don't know what we are instead." "Neither do I," Adrian admitted, "but I'd like to find out. Slowly, without a murder investigation forcing the pace." Sophie almost laughed, the sound catching somewhere between exhaustion and genuine relief. "Slowly," she agreed. "I think, after everything, we've both earned that." "Marcus," when Sophie told him later that week that she and Adrian intended to keep working together, even after Crownridge Trust's crisis had formally ended, only shook his head with the particular fondness of a younger brother who has seen this coming for longer than his sister was willing to admit. 25 years of feud," he said. "And it turns out, the thing that finally ends, it is the two of you refusing to stop asking questions until you found the truth underneath it. Grandfather would have hated that irony. I think I love it." "So do I," Sophie said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "So, I think, does Adrian." Victor Callahan's story earned him the most significant award of his career, though he told anyone who asked that the real credit belonged to a woman who had kept 25 years of evidence safe in a coastal town, waiting for someone brave enough to finally come asking. And in the empty vineyard estate that had once belonged to Walter Ashcroft, now under seizure pending trial, investigators found one final detail that would take considerably longer to unravel than anyone in that boardroom had expected. A second set of encrypted files, untouched by everything that had come before, hinting that the $7 million taken 25 years ago might not have been the only fortune Walter Ashcroft had quietly built from other people's trust, nor, perhaps, the only secret he had never told a soul. You have reached the end of the murder at 1161 by Adrian Blackwell. From a hostile takeover to a dead board member, from missing archive files to the impossible timestamp that exposed a hidden hand, this story followed Adrian Kingston and Sophie Bennett as they uncovered the truth their families were never meant to find. They inherited hatred. They inherited suspicion. They inherited a story that had been carefully shaped by someone else. But when they finally stopped blaming each other and started asking the right questions, the old lie began to fall apart. Murder at 1161 reminds us that some feuds survive, not because they are true, but because no one looks closely enough to challenge them. It reminds us that silence can protect the guilty, but truth, once found, can finally stand where a lie used to be. Adrian and Sophie did what their families could not do for 25 years. They compared notes, they followed the evidence, and they proved that the real enemy was never the family across the table. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. If this story kept you listening, kindly like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys mystery, suspense, corporate betrayal, family secrets, and emotional thrillers. Until the next audiobook, remember, there is no such time as 1161. But sometimes, one impossible detail is all the truth needs to survive.